all ordinary and special meetings of Council are to be audio visually recorded and streamed live. In response to COVID-19 social gathering regulations, this meeting will be held remotely via video conference. Where possible, a live stream of the meeting will be made available. A recording of the meeting will be available via the link on the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council website following the meeting. And in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and Regulation 33, these video audio files will be retained by Council for at least 6 months and made available for viewing live, as well as online within 5 days of the scheduled meeting. The written minutes of the meeting, once confirmed, prevail over the video audio recording of the meeting. I'd like to welcome all councillors and staff and declare the meeting open at 2:00. I haven't got time on 1. Thank you. The Glamorgan Spring Bay Council acknowledges the traditional owners of our region and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I call for all councillors are present. There are no apologies. And in attendance we have Mrs Walters, our Acting General Manager, Miss Higgins, our Council's Executive Officer, Miss Bella Lacqua, sorry about that, Robin, my apologies, Mr Dion Bellingham. I request that elected members to indicate whether they have any interest, personally or by a close associate, as defined in Section 49 of the Local Government Act 1993, or any conflict as described in Council's Code of Conduct to councillors in any item. No? Sorry, councillors, but I need to go back up to 1.4, the late agenda reports. We have a report come in late. It's the Performance Improvement Direction. I need a motion for this report to be accepted into the minutes as 7.11. Councillor Arnold.
Thank you. I'll move that Council accepts the late report item Performance Improvement Direction at agenda item 7.11.
That's correct. Yes. Can I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Brini. All those for? It's unanimous. So that will be going into the agenda at 7.11. Thank you, councillors. I've done the declarations of interest and conflict, so we move over to item 2, confirmation of minutes. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Councillor Churchill.
I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held Tuesday, 23rd of June 2020 at 2 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Browning. Mover wants to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Browning? No. Anyone against? 4. That being the case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. It's unanimous. Can I please have a motion for the item 2.2, special meeting with Council July 6, 2020, please? Councillor Browning.
I move that the minutes of the special meeting of Council held Monday, the 6th of July at 2:30 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Can I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Robinson. Speaker wish to speak to the motion? Seconder?
No.
No. Anyone against the motion? For the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Yep, and that's unanimous. So we have now 2.3, date and purpose of workshops held. There was a workshop held on the Tuesday, the 30th of June 2020. Various topics were discussed. On Tuesday, the 7th of July 2020, land provision schedules, and on Tuesday, the 14th of July 2020, various topics discussed. Can I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Arnold?
Thank you. I'll move that council notes the information.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Simons? Does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
No, not particularly, Acting Mayor. I'd just like to note, though, that it's pleasing to see the reasons why some councillors are not attending the workshops actually recorded in this particular agenda item. So I thank staff for that.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yes, through you, Mayor. The Tuesday, the 30th of June, I was actually in attendance for the planning section of that workshop.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. We will note that. So we'll move now to public question time. Oh, sorry, I'll put that to the vote. Sorry, councillors. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So we'll move now to item 3, public question time, questions without notice. We have received 2 questions without notice, one from Miss Samantha Batchelor from the ASU, and this question will not be accepted as it relates to personnel matters. Then we have another question from Mr. Delator, and I'll read that to you. It says, "Dear Miss Walters, please accept the following question without notice for the ordinary council meeting to be held on Tuesday, 28th of July 2020. As per my previous correspondence, I have copied all councillors in an attempt to avoid being misrepresented during the meeting. Agenda item 7.4, ordinary council meeting 28/7/20. I note with interest the inclusion on the agenda for this meeting of item 7.4, in which the acting general managers request the councillors to consider the reimbursement of previous Mayor Debbie Wisby for legal advice sought following allegations being made against her personally by the ASU and our members. In my communications, as councillors will undoubtedly remember, Ms Wisby was alleged to have personally breached the councillors' code of conduct and was also alleged to be risking the psychosocial health and safety of workers at council as a result of her actions. These were personal matters, not directly related to her position as mayor, and as such, any legal advice that she sought before responding to this letter should be borne by her alone and not by ratepayers. Given that this was personal matter, could the acting general manager please explain why she has put councillors in the awkward position of considering the reimbursement of Miss Wisby for these expenses some 10 months after the fact and only following Miss Wisby's resignation from council? And does council's acting general manager want a precedence being set for future personal matters incurred by council? Did you want to answer that one there, Mrs. Walters?
This matter that Mr. Delator has raised is on the agenda today, and this will be a decision.
So just questions on notice. We have a question from Mrs. Jenny Logie, President of the Bichno Community Association Incorporated, and there is a response from Ms. Walters, Acting General Manager. 3.3, a response to questions on notice taken on in June 23rd, 2020 from Mrs. Kathleen Ford. There has been a response from the Acting General Manager on that. Mr. Delator, Australian Services Union, response from the General Manager is noted. John and Jill Vag, and as signed by 18 Orford residents, there is a response in the agenda regarding that. And a response to question on notice taken on notice at the January 28th meeting 2020 from Mr. Andrew Menzies. There is a response from the Acting General Manager there. We'll move now to number 4, the planning section. Under Regulation 25 of Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulation 2015, I hereby declare that the Council is now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 3 of the agenda. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons?
The council now acts as a planning authority at 2:11 p.m.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Robinson? All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. 4.1, subdivision application 2017/4/5. Can I have the Mr. Lee Whiting, just for your information, Mr. Lee Whiting has entered the room. So we have the subdivision application 4.1. The recommendation is on page 29. Can I please have a motion? Councillor Churchill?
I move that pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, subdivision application 2017/5, to subdivide an existing lot into 3 residential allotments at 2 Inkerman Street, Trarbunna, CT 24575/6, be approved with the following conditions: 1 to 40. 1 to 40.
I have a seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Simons? Does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
No, I don't see any problems. Most of the problems that have come through the representation refer to the drainage issues, and as pointed out by our planner, those issues will be dealt with when we get to the building stage and the DA. And it's just good to note that they have brought up the issue of that one large tree on the block that I would like to see preserved too. But apart from that, I have no other comments.
Thank you. So Councillor Simons, as a seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I've got nothing further to add. Thank you.
I'll ask if anyone would like to speak to the motion. No. Anyone against the motion? So I'll ask the mover if he would like to close the debate. No. Thank you. I'll put it to the vote then. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Lee Whiting is now leaving the room. Thank you. So we'll move now to 4.2, development application 2020/4/69. The recommendation is on page 41. Can I please have a mover? Councillor Arnold.
I'll move pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning Approvals Act 1993, Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, Development application 2020/69 to construct a single dwelling in the form of a caravan and annex at 50 Gordon Street, Bishno, CT 128239/4/1 be approved in accordance with conditions 1 through 10 as in this agenda, in the agenda of the 28th of July.
Thank you. Now, did everyone get that motion? Councillor Browning?
Does Councillor Arnold need to add advice A to F to that?
If I may, actually, Mayor, I don't think so, because it's actually advice rather than a condition. I don't think we've ever had to do that. It's just the condition numbers.
Need a seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Browning? Does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Is it 41? No,
It's just 4. It is 2. So Councillor Arnold and Councillor Browning, in the recommendations, after 50 Gordon Street, Bishno, CT 128239/4, it's not, there's no 1. So that is being removed.
Thank you.
Councillors? Okay, so does a seconder wish to speak to the motion? No? Anyone for the motion? Against? Then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So 4.3, report to Planning Authority. Delegations to determine development applications in specific circumstances. The recommendation is on page 46. Can I please have a motion? Councillor Breeny?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I move that the Planning Authority, pursuant to Section 6 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, delegate the following powers to the Executive Manager Development and General Manager upon the recommendation of a planner. Section 57, to approve an application with or without conditions where up to 3 representations are lodged against the application. Section 57, to refuse an application where the applicant will not agree to an extension of time in accordance with Section 57 in brackets 6 or Section 57 in brackets 6A.
Can I have a seconder to the motion, please? Councillor Churchill? Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This seems to be a move that will assist the planning department in relation to workload. It will also, as it says, avoid numerous delays for people who are having to have their applications for various reasons passed through to the planning authority when in fact it can be dealt with by the executive planning officers. There is one question that I do have for, through you, Mayor, to the planning officer. Can you explain to council the reason for not including the fact that any recommendations for refusal do not come to the planning authority? I don't consider that a major issue, but I'd just like to be clarified as to why in some cases, for example in Kingborough Council, the general manager, deputy general manager, and manager development. Seems nice to have all those people there. Have delegation to approve when there are up to 2 representations, that is less than 3. And the recommendation is to approve, but they don't have approval where recommendations for refusal are involved. That has to go to the planning authority. And I'd just like to have the reason for that not being included here explained if possible.
I do. That's echoing. You'll need to come down here, Ms. Bill. Do you want to come in? My speaker. Is yours on? No.
Councillors, I actually agree that it's probably a good idea to have the accept if it's recommended for refusal, so that recommendations for refusal do go to the planning authority, if that's what councillors all agree with.
If I can respond, Madam Mayor, through you. I thank you for that response, Ms. Bevilacqua. I just wonder whether the weight that's applied to a recommendation for refusal, it seems to me that there should be just as much weight added to a recommendation for approval. What I'm saying is, it seems that Kingborough want to vet any application with a recommendation for refusal on the grounds that they want to check whether or not the planning officers have done a good job on the report. I would have thought that if they have that sort of frame of mind, they might have also included wanting to look at reports that were approved, checking on whether or not the officers have done a good job on that. My inclination is not to have it on, but I just wanted to find out whether or not it was just one of those things that needs to be maybe considered, or we could leave it off, given that this is a delegation that is going to be provided to, in accordance with the motion, to the executive manager development and the general manager. And I would understand that council has the right at any time to remove a delegation, so we can reverse it if we find, or if any council finds that the situation is being abused. Not that that will happen, but if that was to arise through for whatever reasons, presumably council will be able to place the situation back in. Thank you.
Hobart City Council also has the recommendation for refusal. Have to go to.
Is everyone frozen?
No, but we can't hear what was said.
Are we all back?
I can hear you.
No, they're all frozen.
I think most of us are back.
They're frozen. Oh no, they're back.
Hmm.
Do you want to mute that?
Okay, can you hear me okay? Can you turn your volume down, Jim? That better? Okay, I'm just going to do a little computer flip the screen around. So through the acting mayor, I note that Hobart City Council also has any recommendations for refusal must go before it or the planning committee, and I suspect those two councils have it because of a pro-development desire. So they wanted to make sure that development wasn't being stymied, if you like, by refusals. And that's my reading of it. I don't really know why they have it, but that's all I can think as a possible reason.
Okay, so I'm going to go back on to.
Try. They may pick up your voice through.
So can you hear me now, councillors? Thank you. So is that clear for you from Ms. Bevilacqua? Sorry, it's so rude. Is that clear for you, councillors?
Thank
So
you, Mayor. The question was answered, and given that, I would not require that my original motion be altered. I'd leave it as it is. Thank you.
So does the seconder wish to speak to the motion, which was Councillor Churchill?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to say that it was good that Councillor Brini brought that point out, because that was something that was outstanding in that report, that it was treated that way. And I think the relevance there really is that that our planning department is supported and trusted through the process, whether they're recommending support for it or whether they're recommending it be refused. Thank you.
So does anyone wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Arnold?
I don't wish to speak either for or against. So I want to seek some clarification, please. We currently have an instrument of delegation for the General Manager that deals with Section 57 of the local of LUPA. In that document, Section 57(2), approve with or without conditions or refuse any application for a permit made in accordance with Section 57 or 58 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, where there is sufficient time for council to determine, insufficient time, for council to determine the application within the time stipulated in the Act. And the condition around that is where the applicant has refused or failed to agree to an extension of time. There's also a section that says in Section 57, grant permits with or without conditions for applications assessed under the acceptable solution under applicable planning schemes or under the performance criteria within the applicable planning schemes. And the condition around that is where no opposing representations have been received. So I recognise that we're talking about where there are opposing representations. So my question is, if we delegate to the Executive Manager, Development and General Manager as the planning authority, does it negate the delegations or contradict the delegations that the General Manager currently has under the instrument of delegation in relation to Section 57 of LUPA? And is the motion amending that part of Section 57 to remove the delegation to the General Manager to approve or refuse?
With the acting mayor, yes, the delegations would be revised. The one that you referred to, the first one, to be able to approve 57 in brackets 2, to approve with or without conditions or refuse any application for a permit made in accordance with Section 57 or 58. Section 58 has to come out of there because that is a permitted application and the planning authority can't refuse a permitted application. And the issue with this one is that the end part says where there is insufficient time for council to determine the application within the time stipulated in the Act. So we need to wait until the day the statutory time frame expires, 5:05 or whatever on that day, to then refuse this application. Whereas with the new one, it simply says the time frame is taken out of it. If the applicant has said no, they won't agree to the extension of the time frame, even though there's more time allowed. At that point, the general manager or the executive manager of development can actually refuse the application. It gives us a lot more, not leeway, but less room for error.
Thank you very much to the planner. If I may, Acting Mayor, I'm not arguing against the delegation. I'm only trying to clarify the actual process, because we don't need to put in place a delegation as the planning authority that contradicts an already existing delegation to the general manager under the instrument of delegation. So I guess now, in my head at least, it would appear that what we will have to do is review that section of the instrument of delegation and have to the general manager, and have the new delegations recorded somewhere. And I'm not sure where that is, because the instrument of delegation, in my understanding, is purely to that general manager. But that's a, if you like, a technical question that probably needs to be answered by someone other than me.
Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Browning, you had your hand up. Did you want to speak?
Thank you, Mayor, Acting Mayor. I just want some clarification around we're up to 3. So does that mean, to the planner, please, does that mean that it is, because the others in all the other councils are 1 and 2. So was there a reason? So does that mean 2 and over, or does that mean 3 representations and the planning can make the decision?
Through the Acting Mayor, sorry, that I agree, that's not entirely clear from what I've written here. What I mean is that if there are 2 representations, then the delegation would apply. But 3 representations, then it would need to come to the planning authority.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Breen, are you speak for the motion?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I think this motion needs clarification, because there seems to be 2 issues that we need to clarify before we can put this to a vote. And I'm assuming that we're at the debate stage at the moment, and I might have already had my turns. But since I put the motion, I would like to suggest, and I would like feedback from councillors who have raised issues as to whether or not the following amendment will satisfy both questions. On page 46, in the first column, section 57, to approve an application with or without conditions where no more than 2 representations are lodged, and to add to the end of the motion, after the section that reads section 57 in bracket 6 or section 57 in bracket 6A, the following: and review the instrument of delegations accordingly. In other words, review the instrument of delegations in accordance with this motion. Whether or not that satisfies the two councillors is up to them to.
Oh, what do I need to go to? Okay, so
To modify.
I will need Councillor Churchill's approval to modify the motion.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so the motion's been modified to, could you read that out for? Just hang on a minute, Councillor Browning.
I'll read the motion in full. Move Councillor Keith Rennie, seconded Councillor Rob Churchill, that the Planning Authority, pursuant to Section 6 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, delegate the following powers to the Executive Manager Development and General Manager upon the recommendation of a planner. Section 57, to approve an application with or without conditions where no more than 2 representations are lodged against the application. Section 57, to refuse an application where the applicant will not agree to an extension of time in accordance with Section 57(6) or Section 57(6)(a) and review the instrument of delegations accordingly. Or did you want, after Section 6(a), a complete new sentence under the table which would read, and review the instrument of delegations accordingly?
So,
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Madam Acting Mayor, could I just ask Councillor Browning if he would be happy to have and review the General Manager's instrument of delegation, because that's where it relates to.
We're talking about delegating powers to the Executive Manager Development as well. Does the Executive Manager Development have delegation rights, or does the General Manager allow the Executive Manager Development to be subject to his approval?
thank you. I'll pass it over to Mrs. Walters for answer.
Yep. So just under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, so under Section 6, delegations, subsection 3, the Planning Authority may, by resolution, delegate any of its functions or powers under this Act, other than the power of delegation, to a person employed by the authority. So under this piece of legislation, you can go to any employee of the authority, whereas say under the Local Government Act, you would delegate to the General Manager, and then the General Manager would delegate. It's just a bit different under LUPA.
Councillor Arnold?
I'm not arguing that point at all, Acting Mayor, at all. I see that delegation under the Planning Authority. And I'm not arguing, I hope I'm not arguing, I hope I'm debating. My concern is around whether this delegation contradicts the delegation that we have given the General Manager under the instrument of delegation for Section 57. So there needs, and under that particular delegation, Council can only, that's the one, Miss Walters, Council can only delegate to the General Manager. And I think, if my memory serves me correctly, the process is Council delegates certain functions from certain acts to the General Manager, who the General Manager can then on or sub-delegate, as far as I'm aware. And so that's where I'm coming from in relation to this. As the Planning Authority, we are delegating to an officer and the General Manager. Don't have a problem with that, because it is covered under Section 6 of LUPA. I accept that. I just need to make sure that one doesn't cancel the other one out in the way that they are currently written, because to make the process smooth for the Planning Department. That's all I'm trying to clarify.
So I think what Councillor Arnott's trying to say is just that we're referring to, so it's an instrument of delegation to the position of the General Manager, that document specifically for the General Manager is the one that's getting updated to reflect that they're not in conflict of each other. So is that correct, Jill? So
yes, but if I may, Madam Acting Mayor, I don't know, under the planning authority delegations, we can delegate to an officer. But under the other delegation, I think we can only delegate to the General Manager, and the General Manager sub-delegates to the officer. So that's where I'm trying to figure out where this particular delegation, which, as I've said, I have absolutely no problem with this particular delegation at all, if it is going to make our council a far better functioning council in terms of our massive workload in planning. I don't have a problem with it at all. I just need to get it clarified that we as a council do the delegation so that there can be no, if you like, legal comeback. So that's all I'm asking in relation to getting clarification, or whether we need to review the instrument of delegation and where do we record this particular delegation. And so I think that's just a matter for the General Manager to review. I'm happy for this motion to be put, as long as the General Manager reviews how this is recorded and that it's not contradictory to the other one.
Yeah, we'll need to update this document, which needs a review anyway, and to come back. Yeah, which hopefully councils will come to the August workshop, that document as well. So.
Okay, so does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Against the motion? Okay, so then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Ms. Bella Lacqua. That's okay. So under Regulation 25 of Local Government Meeting Procedures, Regulations 2015, the chairperson hereby declares that the council is no longer acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 3 of the agenda. Now, please have a motion. Councillor Arnold.
I'll move that council no longer acts as a planning authority at, I think it's 242.
A seconder for the motion. Councillor Churchill. All those in favour? Thank you. It's unanimous. We now come to the financial reports. Number 5.1, financial reports for period ending 30th of June 2020. There is a motion, a recommendation at the bottom of page 48. Can I have the motion? Mover, please. Councillor Simons.
The council receives and notes the financial reports as attached to this report for the period ended 30th of June 2020.
I have a seconder for the motion, please. Robinson. Is there any questions arising within the reports? Councillor Simons.
I have a question with regards, through you, Acting Mayor, to our General Manager, Ms Walters. On page 50 in the notes, note number 10, we've got an increased cost of $158,000 due to coverage by acting GMs in the SOE process. My question was, earlier on in the proceedings of council, the SOE process had a figure of, I believe, $50,000 attached to it. I was just wondering how we were going with that budget and whether or not we're on budget or below that. What I'm interested in is, are we going to spend more than that on that process?
Acting General Manager.
Through you, Mayor, I'll take that on notice to check where we're at. I don't believe we've gone over that allocation, but given that we're now going through to September, we probably just need to look at where we're sitting overall. So I'll take that on notice.
Thank you. Any other councillors have questions? Councillor Arnold.
My question is on page 53, and I actually have two. Could I get some clarification around the $64,000 cost overrun on the Tribunna tennis courts? I know the Acting General Manager has advised in the past that the drought money could be modified, if you like, as long as it stays within that $1 million mark. But there seems to be a number of cost overruns from this money, and I can't exactly see where this extra $64,000 could be found within that drought money. And my second question relates to the plant and equipment. The excavator 305E is almost double the price. Now, I think this question was asked last meeting or maybe the meeting before by someone, and I do apologise, I don't recall the response.
So just in relation to the plant, as that we have discussed that one. So that was where we had to change the item we replaced because there was an incident with the piece of plant, and we got an insurance payout for that. So we put that with the budget allocation to replace the item that was damaged, if not by the insurance company. So there is income that's come in from the insurance company in operations to cover that. In relation to the tennis court, so overall we're within our grant allocation. That project was also, there was a contribution from the tennis club of 10,000, plus council were allocating, I think from memory it was 30,000 towards wages in addition to the grant, because we can't claim any of our wages under the grant. So we just recorded here the total project costs, not the amount that's been funded by the grant.
Thank you.
Councillor Churchill.
Yes, through you to the General Manager, Mayor Woods. On that same page, page 53, it's only a little one down the bottom there, but the event, that event figure that's now listed in there at 11,256, that seems to have grown from about 8,600 last month. And I'm just wondering what is being added into there.
In terms of the detail, I'd have to take that on notice. It may have been something that wasn't correctly allocated that we picked up and fixed in relation to that project. So it's all together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does any other councillors have a question? Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, I have just a second question there, again to the General Manager, through you, Mayor. With the, there's been a reallocation of some of the repair work to operational, as in the sealing of the roads, sealed road pavements. Down below that, the jet patcher costs, shouldn't they be treated the same way? Should they be put into operational as well, or is there a difference there?
They will be as well, Councillor Churchill, through you, Mayor. So the ones in the top section, the road repairs haven't been costed to those codes. So I haven't, apart from a few small amounts, so I haven't had to do any actual moving there, but we do have higher costs in our roads operations costs. And the jet patcher costs, they will move to operations through the end of year process, along with anything else we deem to be operational and not creating an asset, like the event project.
Thank you.
Councillor Brini.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I have a question on the council buildings on page 55, regarding the Triabunna Depot, the dog pound upgrade, where it states, including power and security, there is a 1,300 spent of a 12,000 budget. I was wondering, power and security seems to be, it's only 20% completed, I presume, and it's still, you know, being forward to 2021. Power and security would probably be an important issue. Is there a reason for the delay?
Acting General Manager.
Probably need to take that on notice from a formal response from the Manager of Building and Facilities. I think just all the work and the priorities around the drought relief grants has given those projects a lot during the year.
Thank you.
So within the reports here, has any other councillor got a question to the Acting General Manager? I do. If I may, on page 53, under Council Building, the Swansea Loo with a View, when will that be coming back to Council for discussion or placement? Or
that is being looked at through the boat trailer parking project in Swansea to look at where that could be placed and to ensure the design factors that in. We haven't included that in the budget for 2021. It was deemed, as long as we factored into the design to look at for the year after was the plan. So at some point during the year that will come back.
thank you. So there'll be no more questions from councillors to the Acting General Manager. I'll put the motion that is on page 48 that Council receives and notes the financial reports as attached to this report for period ending 30th of June 2020. Moved by Councillor Simon, seconded by Councillor Robinson. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We move now to section 6 on page 56, section 24 committees. There's a recommendation there. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Breeny.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report on the meeting of the Statement of Expectations Committee, number 6, in brackets, be received.
Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Churchill. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
The seconder like to speak to the motion? Anyone else would like to speak to or for the motion? That being the case, I'll put the motion. Those for the motion? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So we now move. Oh yes, sorry. Can I have a? There's a recommendation on page 60. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Browning.
I move that the unconfirmed minutes of the Statement of Expectation Committee meeting held on the 20th of July 2020 be received and noted.
Seconded for the motion. Councillor Arnold. Any discussion? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. We move on to 7. Officers' reports requiring a decision. The appointment, 7.1, appointment of Acting Deputy Mayor. Before we do this, I'll call for nominations, and if the nominated councillor accepts the nomination, I'll call for you to text the name of the vote that you wish to vote for to Miss Walters. And can you please check that your number that you have is Miss Walters' work phone number? and that is 0468 710 042. Do we all have that number, Councillor Browning?
Can you repeat that, please? Sorry.
That's okay. 0468 710 042. That's Mrs. Walters' work phone number. So I'll call from the floor nominations, please. Councillor Churchill.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Robinson, please.
Does Councillor Robinson accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Any others from the floor? Councillor Arnold.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Simons.
Does Councillor Simons accept the nomination?
Yes, I will. Yep.
So is there any other calls from the floor? So councillors, I will ask you please to send your preferred vote to Mrs. Walters. It will either be Councillor Robinson or Councillor Simons.
Thank you, councillors. I have 7 votes in, and it is Councillor Robinson has the most favourable votes.
So Councillor Robinson has been nominated by vote. Councillor Arnold.
I'll move that council appoints Councillor Robinson as acting deputy mayor until the outcome of the by-election to fill a vacancy for one councillor and mayor is known.
Second for that. Does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you. It speaks for itself.
Councillor Churchill.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Robinson, for taking this role on, and we hope that you don't have to use it many times, because we hope that our acting mayor Woods is there all the time and able to undertake all the responsibilities required. Thank you.
Do anyone want to speak to the motion?
No.
Against the motion? I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We move now to 7.2, transfer of land to Centre Care Evolve. There is a motion on page 64. May I please have a motion from Councillor Robinson.
In accordance with S177 of the Local Government Act 1993, that Council by absolute majority authorise the Acting General Manager to develop a contract to transfer lots 62 to 72 /555156 and 98 /55156 to Centre Care Evolve Housing for a proposed unit development in return for development of lots 25-28 /555156 into fully serviced power, water and sewer lots with road access in Spencer Street, formed to a standard acceptable by Council's engineer from the Boyle Street intersection past the access to lot 28, with a condition that the transfer of ownership being subject to the development application for the community housing units being approved.
I have a seconder for the motion. Councillor Churchill? Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Acting Mayor.
Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. I'm being a pedant. Can I have the word passed as spelt in P-A-S-S-E-D changed to P-A-S-T? Because I think that's more correct. Second line from the bottom of that motion.
Yeah.
Double 5156 and then the recommendations for 555.
Oh,
So
yes.
it might just be a technicality, but
Can we just 2 seconds, councillors? Check the title reference. It's councillors, can we make a correction to the title reference? The lot number's correct. It's 55156 rather than 555156.
Councillors, do you have that that slight change?
Thank you, Mayor.
Apologies.
Okay.
That's in 2 places.
In all places. Yeah. So lot 62 to 72, 55156 and 98, 55156, that one's correct. Lots 25 to 28, 55156.
So I'll ask if anyone would like to speak for the motion. Against the motion? Councillor Arnold?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I need to preface this by saying that I do support the community housing project. I think there's certainly some value in that. I can't, however, support this process because it appears to be circumventing the requirements around the sale or disposal of public land as required by council. So I will not be supporting the motion.
So would anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Simons?
I'm neither speaking for or against it. I just was after a little bit of clarification, probably through you, the Mayor, to our General Manager, Ms Walters. Are we in effect ending up with 11 lots that can be 11 rateable lots that we will receive rates on as a council?
Without seeing the DA and the way they're proposing to do it, I probably couldn't comment for certain. I'm not sure if Mr Bellingham.
That's fine. I'm happy for you to take that on notice.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yep. And I'm assuming there's just a spelling error in paragraph 4 or 5, just above the strategic plan. It says CRH were proposing. Is that supposed to be CEH?
Yes.
Yep. And thirdly, just in the budget implications, it says that if we, once lots 25, 26 and 27 are sold, this will assist council's cash flow in the order of 355,000. Expected profits on the sale of assets, which I assume are the lots 25, 26 and 27, is expected to be in the order of $70,000. What are we applying the expenses to? The difference between the $70,000 and the 355?
It was, sorry, I'll just correct that as well. So it was originally 3 lots and we've now pushed them to 4 lots. otherwise we weren't going to make profit. The figures are still as they stand though. So that's just looking at the value of the land as it currently stands. So taking that away from what we're giving up. So the land that they want to develop, that is, it's on our books as an asset, is valued at about, on our books, I've got that written there. So it was last valued at $270,000. So the difference from the 270, so what will hit our P&L will be a $70,000 profit, but in the bank we would get what we the full cash.
Yes. Thank you.
Councillor Browning.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. To the to Mrs. Walters, do we need to change valuate attachments all the way through? So lot 62, 72, 555, get rid of right at the top.
Oh, yes.
It's got 555, get rid of, so all the way through the document, get rid of the, where it says 3 5s.
Correct.
Is that right, or am I
Yes,
wrong?
and the attachments will be the correct reference.
Okay, yep, right, cheers. Thank you.
So anyone speaking for the motion? Councillor Simons.
Apologies. Just through you, Mayor, could I just get some clarification perhaps from the General Manager, Ms Walters, with regards to Councillor Arnold's concerns about the disposal of council-owned land? I just didn't quite understand that in the beginning.
Councillor Arnold might like to elaborate. She might be referring to section 178, which is sale of public land. This isn't classified as public land, as far as I'm aware, because it's not like it's a public open space or specific land types that are listed that are required to go under section 178, and we need to go through public consultation, whereas this isn't listed as public land per se, it's just residential land.
Thank you.
If I may, Acting Mayor, I will say I've just looked up section 177 and I do see how it can happen. It doesn't alter the fact that I'm not going to support the motion. Thank you.
So anyone else to speak for the motion? Against the motion? I'll ask the mover if he would like to close the debate, and that would be Councillor Robinson.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's Councillor Woods, Councillor Browning, Councillor Simons, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Breeny. Those against? Councillor Arnold. The motion is carried. 6-1. Thank you. So, yeah. So we'll go to 7.3, East Coast Tasmanian Tourism Funding. And I have a motion, please. It is on page 66. Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move that Council provide East Coast Tasmania Tourism $60,000 in funding for the period 1st of July 2020 to 30th of June 2021.
The motion. Councillor Simons. Did all councillors get that motion? Would you like me to read it to you, councillors? Yes.
Councillor Cheryl Arnold, seconded Councillor Michael Simons, that Council provide East Coast Tasmania Tourism $60,000 in funding for the period 1st of July 2020 - 31st of December 2020, and that the funding arrangements be reviewed before 31st of December 2020.
No, that's not the motion.
So it's to 60,000 for the period 1 July 2020 to 30th June 2021. It's fixed.
Done.
So can you read that again?
I'll read it again. Move Councillor Cheryl Arnold, seconded Councillor Michael Simons, that Council provide East Coast Tasmania Tourism $60,000 in funding for the period 1st of July 2020 to 31st of December 2020.
No, 30 June.
30th of June.
30 June 2021.
Done.
So for a full year, basically.
Okay.
Full stop.
Right.
Okay.
Done.
So councillors, are you, did you hear the motion? Yes. So I'll ask the mover if they want to speak to the motion.
Yes, please. Thank you. With Council's recent decision to divest from visitor information centres, I think it's particularly important for us to support both the East Coast Tasmania Tourism Group and the industry through the challenging environment that to some extent as a council we've created. The worth of the tourism industry to the East Coast and the whole of Tasmania is something that we have to recognise. If we don't support East Coast Tasmania Tourism Group, how will we achieve number 7 in our strategic plan? Encouraging investment from individuals and businesses in development that fits with the values and character of our region. As our strategic plan states, our region depends on initiative and energy of individuals to make the experience of visiting and living here even better. As a council, we need to be seen to be supporting those individuals who support us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold. Councillor Simons, you seconded the motion. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, I'd just like to echo Councillor Arnold's thoughts there, and I'd like to add that I think this organisation actually provides tremendous support to the industry. They're very professional, and I think we can see that through their strategic plan, the 2021 that we've got in our attachments. They provide a lot of value for a lot of people on the East Coast. The original motion, I think it's unhelpful for an organisation to only get half their funding. I think it would make it very difficult for them to operate properly, not knowing whether they've got a year's worth of funding. It's not a huge amount of money to add to let them have the full 12 months to be able to operate. And I think it's money well spent that we get a lot of good value from, and so do the ratepayers within our municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Churchill?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm not speaking against the motion at all. I'm just speaking about the motion, and probably really in support of the motion. I can see that in recent times our East Coast Tasmania tourism has actually been doing things across the community, and they're certainly helping us in this transition period for the VICs. And I think that's really worthy of acknowledgement. I just do think that perhaps we need to be, we've got reports attached to this item. I'd just like to see a little bit more, perhaps in the way of financial reporting coming through to us on a little more regular basis, so that we can see how our $60,000 a year is being used. If that's not an inconvenience and that's appropriate, then I think that that information would be useful for me to be able to see what our contribution is achieving. But I'll certainly be voting for the motion. Thank you.
So is there anyone who'd like to speak for the motion? Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. I'm not speaking for or against it, but I just would like to know at some time how much the state government contributes to East Coast Tasmania tourism. I think that'd be an interesting piece of information. Maybe we have it, maybe we don't. If someone can let me know, that's the only query. I think we do need to support them at this point in time, given the circumstances.
Councillor Robinson, Acting General Manager Mrs Walters can answer that question for you now.
Thank you, Mayor. Acting Mayor. So the annual funding for 2021 is $246,462.11. And this funding, it's broken into two components. 81% of that comes from Tourism Tas and 19% comes from state growth. And then traditionally, the two East Coast councils contribute the same amount of funding, 60,000 each.
Thank you.
Could you repeat that, please? Sorry.
246,000, so 246, $462.11. 246,462.11.
Sorry. And the 81% is from
Tourism Tasmania. So
okay.
81% of that money, that 246, comes from Tourism Tas and 19% from state growth. That was provided by the CEO, Rhonda Taylor, this afternoon.
Can I ask where ours, sorry, through the acting mayor, where our 60,000 goes in that?
It's in addition to that, 60,000 from the Morgan Spring Bay Council and an additional 60,000 from Break a Day Council.
Thank you. Councillor Barini.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Acting Mayor. That equates to $366,000 is donated, is funding to East Coast Tasmania Tourism. I think from our point of view, and I would assume that from the state's point of view and from Break a Day's point of view, we'd like to see some very comprehensive breakdown of where those funds are spent, how they're spent. The CEO of ECTT did indicate at a meeting a couple of weeks ago that the acting mayor was in attendance as well, showed that the local tourist groups the local businesses that are part of Tourism Tasmania and East Coast Tasmania Tourism were very reticent to be utilising digital format. And one of the things that East Coast Tasmania Tourism was trying to foster was getting the businesses who are presumably benefiting for these considerable funds to get off their seats and to be involved in the actions and the initiatives of East Coast Tasmania Tourism. I would think that as a major contributing council, we should be asking them for some. They do provide us with what I understand has been provided with KPIs, etc. But also we need to have some sort of comprehensive undertaking of showing us where our money is spent. I would have thought in relation to this motion that given the situation with COVID and the very tenuous situation with tourism as it stands at the moment, I would have thought that a 50% contribution over the next 6 months would be an opportunistic way to look more closely at the end of this calendar year, as per the original motion. We might want to inject a bit more because it may need more. But if we're going to say we're injecting 60 now, I would suggest that, although I'm inclined to support the motion as it stands, we may need to keep open minds that at the end of this calendar year, given the situation with tourism and the way that jobs, etc., are falling apart, tourism on the East Coast may need an injection a lot more than just our 60,000 now. But as far as this motion goes, I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Browning.
I won't be able to support this motion. I would have supported the 30,000 to the end of December, but and I know everyone's doing it tough, and I think and not just tourism, and I think that at the end of December we will have a better idea about where the whole of the economy of Australia is going, and need to reassess it then. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Browning. Anyone else speaking for or against the motion? I'll ask the mover, Councillor Arnold, if she would like to close debate.
No, thank you. I think everything's been said that needs to be said.
That being said, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? So that is Councillor Woods, Councillor Simons, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Breeney. Those against? Councillor Browning. The motion is carried 6-1. We move now to 7.4, reimbursement of costs. There's a motion at the bottom of the page of 68. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Mayor Woods. I'll move that council not reimburse Debbie Wisby $1,391.50 for expenses incurred in September 2019 during her role as Mayor of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council in seeking legal advice in relation to alleged claims and demands made by the Australian Services Union.
Can I have a seconder to the motion? If there's no seconder to the motion, sorry, Councillor Arnold. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor Woods. I'd just like to say that as the background shows in the report, Miss Wisby sought her own personal legal advice on the matter. And as we heard earlier, that the allegations were as a result of breaches of councillor code of conduct, and as such are of a personal nature. Thirdly, I would have thought that if the former mayor acquired legal advice at the expense of ratepayers, that request should have been made through formal channels. And as council, I don't believe we were given an opportunity to consider such a request. So I'm afraid those expenses will have to be borne by the former Mayor Wisby.
Seconder wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, please, Acting Mayor. There's no process in the Act that I can find that allows for the personal legal expenses of a councillor to be reimbursed. Despite policy 4.2 being some 11 years out of date, it is nonetheless the policy of council as determined under Schedule 5 of the Local Government Act. In addition, Regulation 43 of the Local Government General Regulations does not provide for personal legal expenses to be reimbursed. Further, the matter has been outstanding since September 2019. If the then Mayor was seeking reimbursement, the matter should have been brought to council prior to this. The non-payment of a reimbursement is more relevant now that Ms Wisby is no longer a councillor. Should council be reimbursing a ratepayer for legal expenses that were incurred during a term or part of a term as an elected member? The answer is probably no. Thank you.
Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Churchill.
Off mute.
I will get there one day. I've just got a question to ask for a start of the two more experienced councillors, Mayor Woods and Councillor Arnold. I'd just like to know, I mean, occasions like this must have arisen in previous council times. I only know of one other apart from the one involving former Mayor Wisby, and that was my own. I'd just be interested to know how that was handled in previous times, if I can put that as a question, and then I'd like to ask something else if that could be answered.
Sure. Councillor Arnold?
To Councillor Churchill, through you, Acting Mayor, I'm not aware of anything that even resembles a precedent for this, Councillor Churchill, I'm sorry. It's not something that I can ever recall dealing with in the past.
Thank you. I would just like to just put a foreshadowing motion, should this motion not succeed. Is that okay, Mayor Woods?
Yes.
That's fine. Do you want that motion now? I can read it now or whatever.
Yes, please. Now.
My motion would be that 1, Council develops policy on the payment of legal fees incurred relating to matters involving elected members in their course of duty. Want that slower?
Point of order.
Point of order, yes.
Point of order, Acting Mayor. I'm not sure that a foreshadowed motion like that can be introduced into this agenda item. I need to get some advice around that. I don't have a problem with it, Councillor Churchill, at all. I'm just not sure of the process to allow that type of foreshadowed motion, because it's actually bringing in new information, if you like, into an agenda item. So I need a ruling on that.
So with it, councillors, I'm just taking some advice at the moment. I'll pop you on mute. Thank you, councillors. With regards to Councillor Arnold's point of view order, I'm going to allow Councillor Churchill to move on with his foreshadowed motion, because there may be something in the later part of the motion that will pertain and bring it all together. Thank you, Councillor Churchill.
Yes, it was Ms Higgins able to get that written down okay?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, can you please repeat that nice and slow?
Okay, so that 1, Council develops policy on the payment of legal fees.
Yep.
Incurred relating to matters involving elected members.
Yes.
In their course of duty.
Yes.
And 2, a decision on the reimbursement of Debbie Wisby's legal fees.
Yes.
Be deferred until such a policy is agreed.
I'm just going to pop you on mute. Pop you on mute there for a minute, councillors. I'll get back to you. Sorry, councillors, I just needed to concur with Mrs Walters and Ms Higgins on Councillor Churchill's foreshadowed motion. I'm going to ask Ms Walters to answer, please.
Hopefully you can hear me okay. So just wanted to make it clear, a policy would not normally apply retrospectively. So it wouldn't allow the policy to address the decision at hand.
The motion can sit there.
Yeah, the motion can sit there as a foreshadowed motion, but you need to understand that it doesn't address the particular matter in front of us today.
So Councillor Churchill, is that understanding?
Yes, okay. Well, I shall withdraw the motion and see what the outcome of the first of the motion that's been put is, and then I may put a further motion depending on that outcome. Thank you.
We would still need a, Councillor Churchill, we would still need a foreshadowed motion if that was the case. If the motion is lost, it's lost. If the motion is carried, it's carried.
Okay.
Councillor Breeny?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. So what I'm led to understand is that if the motion to not reimburse were to be lost, then the only option is for a foreshadowed motion to say that it's reimbursed.
We need the foreshadowed motion on the table now before the vote.
And I'd need a foreshadowed motion on the table now, which states the opposite to the motion that might be lost. Therefore, we don't have the ability to divest ourselves of what is a very divisive motion or concept altogether of whether we should or shouldn't reimburse Debbie Wisby legal expenses, when I don't know whether any of us here, and I certainly do not, know whether or not the statutory implications are anything more than the fact that we are entitled to offer reimbursement, provided somebody comes up with legal advice to us as to whether or not these expenses are deemed to be, in the legal sense, personal expenses. And I cannot for the life of me understand how myself as a councillor can be deemed to be able to decipher whether or not we are given enough information at the moment to be able to define whether or not the expenses that were incurred, whether you like it or whether you don't, and you know, I'm not saying one or the other, whether or not these were personal expenses. In my opinion, they definitely were not, but I'm not an expert. And if we're now being asked to say whether or not we don't reimburse them, therefore depriving Ms. Wisby of a legally returnable expense, or we say that it's to be paid and subsequently under legal advice that it shouldn't have been, we are left in a very precarious situation. I would have thought that a motion that was more likely to be able to be accepted at the moment would be that we consider a policy, and the policy defines very carefully to us what should be done, and a decision on this issue be made accordingly. But no, who am I? Thank you.
I can provide some.
Councillors, Mrs. Walters is going to provide some comment on what Councillor Breeny has just said.
Not sure I can answer it directly, but just to provide some context and some background. So when the legal fees were incurred, and obviously Ms. Wisby incurred those directly herself and came to the General Manager at the time, seeking reimbursement after incurring the expenses, so didn't ask first. He sought legal advice on the matter, and basically an extract is partly what's in the statutory implications, that it's really a decision of council because the regulations and the policy don't cover it, but council can make a decision on the matter.
Thank you, Ms Walters. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Yeah, I think there are two really important points. One, whether they were personal expenses or whether they were incurred in Debbie Wisby's position as mayor. So that needs to be decided, I guess. And if they were in the position of mayor, I would think they would be covered by us, as within if you're an employee in any other government department in which I've worked previously. If they are allegations and not proven, then government departments will support you in a legal sense. If you were convicted of, or it was proven that you were, committing fraud or some major crime, they would not support you. So to me, it's a determination as to whether these are personal expenses or whether they were incurred as a result of Debbie Wisby's position as mayor. So I don't know if the Acting General Manager can confirm any of that or not.
Might be before your time, Councillor Robertson, but all councillors were issued a copy of the letter that Ms Wisby received. It was about a 2-page letter with allegations against her. It did not result in a code of conduct. It did not result in any findings of guilt in any way because it didn't actually proceed to anything. But that letter was given to all councillors. I didn't deem it appropriate to put in an open agenda item, and you already have that information. So it's part of judgment call, but I understand exactly where Councillor Robertson's coming from. And, there was a similar situation with a previous mayor where they didn't come to a council table. Council engaged the lawyers for that code of conduct and paid those legal fees of about $5,000 directly to the lawyers. That's the only other similar situation I have found in relation to this matter. But you do make a valid point that at this stage, there's no, it hasn't proceeded to in terms of justice, in terms of whether guilt or not guilt, that hasn't been found. Former mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Arnold. And then you, Councillor.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. There's a number of issues around this. The circumstance that the Acting General Manager just mentioned was in relation to a code of conduct. And Council, I believe, has to pay all the costs in relation to a code of conduct. If there are other legal fees, then whoever that is has to pay that themselves. Under a code of conduct, you cannot have legal representation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, under Schedule 5 of the Local Government Act, Council has to put in place a policy in relation to expenses. Now that relates to the expenses that are listed under Regulation 43 of the Local Government Act General Regulations, and any other expenses that Council determines at the time. Now, when the policy, which is 4.2, was put in place, as I said, 11 years ago, we didn't determine any other expenses. The policy only deals with those items under Regulation 43, which are: a councillor is entitled to be reimbursed for reasonable expenses in accordance with the policy adopted under Schedule 5 to the Act in relation to telephone rental, telephone calls and the use of the internet, travelling, care of any person who is dependent on the councillor and who requires the care while the councillor is carrying out his or her duties or functions as a councillor, and stationery and office supplies. And our policy actually does state that there is, the mayor will be afforded an office for an office and internet connection or something, or words to that effect. That's 4.2. So at the time of putting in place the policy, which still applies, even though it is quite old, we didn't make a determination that we would pay other expenses beyond what's listed in here. And in fact, if you look at it logically, we did actually reduce the requirements, if you like, or the reimbursements, because it says care of any person. Our policy only allows childcare. So we restricted, if you like, the expenses under that particular section of it. So I think Councillor Churchill's certainly on the right path in terms of we need to look at our policies. We need to get a proper policy in place in this, because let's face it, 11 years down the track, we are living in a very litigious society. So as elected members, I think we do need to have some protection, if you like, in relation to the payment of our expenses if we find ourselves in a similar situation to what the former mayor found herself. But I come back to the point that this has been in the system since September 2019. So my view is it should have been dealt with in the last 9 months, not now when it's particularly difficult because the former mayor is now a ratepayer. And I really struggle with that in terms of the legislation and how we deal with it. You know, it's a really, it's a very vexed question and a very difficult question. Thank you.
Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, if I could just make a couple of points. Firstly, just going back to Councillor Arnold's comments about the Code of Conduct and legal fees pertaining to that. The process of the Code of Conduct is definitely a council expense. However, outside of that, you can get legal advice, and that legal advice is at your expense, even though you can't take an Australian lawyer into the room with you, to defend yourself. Why am I familiar with this? I've been through it. It is, that's the first point I would make. And I mean, I really struggle with this because I'm struggling dealing with it in open council, to be very honest. And I think perhaps this should have been a matter for a closed session. However, it is what it is. I would like to foreshadow a motion, which is the recommendation, if you would like me to read that out.
Yes, please, Councillor Churchill.
My foreshadowed motion is that council reimburse Debbie Wisby $1,391.50 in expenses incurred in the role of Mayor of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council in seeking legal advice in relation to claims and demands by the ASU. Thank you.
There's been considerable debate with this, so I'll ask the mover of the motion if they would like to close the debate.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Woods, I would close the debate, and it's interesting listening to what everyone has to say, but I think in this situation it's quite clear that it was personal legal advice that was sought. It says that in the background and the overview. I think we're at risk of creating a precedent here, and I think the original motion should stand as it is. Thank you.
Okay, that being said, councillors, I would like to put the motion, which is the original motion, that council not reimburse Debbie Wisby $1,391.50 in expenses incurred in the role of Mayor of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council in seeking legal advice in relation to the claims made by claims and demands by the ASU. So those all in favour? Oh, sorry. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Oh, no. Time. I can't. You can't, can you? Oh, sorry. Councillor Breeny.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. the motion read originally, as I understand, in relation to alleged claims.
That's correct.
Correct. Thank you, Councillor Breeny.
Did you want to, Councillor Symes, I think you also had in there in September 2019. Did you want that in the motion?
Yes, that's correct.
So, councillors, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Miss Higgins to read the motion, please.
Let's hope I get this one right. Moved Councillor Michael Simon, seconded Councillor Cheryl Arnold, that council not reimburse Debbie Wisby $1,391.50 for expenses incurred in September 2019 during her role as Mayor of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council in seeking legal advice in relation to alleged claims and demands made by the ASU.
Is that correct, Councillor Simon?
I believe I had Australian Services Union.
Hold
As opposed to the abbreviation. But other than that, that was correct. Thank you.
So all those in favour of that motion? That is Councillor Woods, Councillor Simons, Councillor Arnold. Those against? Councillor Browning, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Breeny and Councillor Robinson. The motion is lost. I will now put the foreshadowed motion. So I need a second for the foreshadowed motion. Is there a second for Councillor Breeny? So the motion that is up now is that Council reimburse Debbie Wisby $1,391.50 in expenses incurred in the role of Mayor of Glamorgan Spring Bay Council in seeking legal advice in relation to claims and demands by the ASU. Is that correct, Councillor Churchill?
Yes, that's correct, Mayor Woods, and may I speak to that?
Yes, you may.
As is quite clear, it is not the motion that I wanted to put, but the outcome needs to be determined, and I still believe that under these circumstances where Mayor Wisby was not, she may have been accused, there were allegations, but these allegations were not proved and were not carried against her. And I think that it is certainly not reasonable unless that judgment has been made. I would also suggest I would have liked to have got to a point where we could have said in more detail how we manage these in the future. And I'm not saying in this particular case, but perhaps in other cases we should get to a stage where we can actually say if the allegation is carried, then the money be paid back to council, something like that. I think there's a lot of things there to be considered. I also think that as elected members, we need some sort of financial protection. And I've written some notes here along the lines that because of the way I wanted this done, and I can't do that, I've just said that your willingness to nominate as an elected member should not be deterred or suppressed by the threat of the cost of legal fees being incurred while undertaking your role as an elected member or your ability to cover such costs. We need to formalise better policy on this. I would be also interested to find out more detail on the case that Acting General Manager Walters has alluded to. I'm just curious about what happened in that case, but she may or may not be able to expand on that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Breeny, would you, as a seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, my concern is that, as I stated before, I don't know I certainly am unqualified myself to be able to break through the legalese of this, and I wish that I could. But as far as I can see, one of the worries that I have is that as an elected member, if I'm accused of all sorts of misdemeanors, etc., and officially accused by a body that's representing the staff, I've just signed a statement of expectations in relation to the way that I'm dealt with, and that I deal with other councillors, that the mayor deals with the general manager, etc. And I would have assumed that any action taken by representatives of staff against elected members would be dealt with through the general manager, through policy, of course, and whether that policy is available to the general manager or not, or to us councillors as well, dealt with issues in relation to staff through the general manager, so that it is the general manager who provides information to councillors and we deal with, rather than as elected members having to go off and get our own legal advice, which, by the way, I can't afford. So I'd be the sort of person who'd sit there and have this sort of thing thrown at me and not be able to do anything. I don't know about anybody else, but I would say that any elected members throughout local government would be very reticent to stand as councillors if they thought that every time that an organisation made accusations against you, that you were bound to look after your own legal advice and defend yourself. Whether or not that's the case here, I'm not saying that that is or it isn't. But until we rectify this situation by having a policy, a clear policy, council policy that deals with this issue and doesn't deal with the interpretation of grey matter in local government general regulations, etc., and the Act, then as far as I'm concerned, we make up our own minds, and my mind is made up. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there anyone to speak against the motion? Councillor Simons?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Acting Mayor, through you, that I certainly note all the points and concerns of the councillors. They're quite valid and they're quite reasonable. But the fact of the matter is they don't apply to this situation. They are for a conversation. We've actually created quite a dangerous precedent here in my mind. And secondly, why was the legal advice sought? Was it required or not required? It didn't come to council. No one was asked, and the advice was sought before any permission was given to gain it. This is an unnecessary expense for ratepayers, in my mind.
Thank you. Anyone for the motion? Councillor Browning?
I'd just like to, through the acting mayor, say that it is really difficult, and I did speak with the acting GM, Mrs. Walters, about it, and to see if it, should be done in closed session, and she said no. So, I've found it a really difficult thing to deal with. I agree with everything that Councillor Churchill and Councillor Breeny have said, and I'd just like to say that the ex-mayor, would she have incurred those costs if she was just a normal ratepayer? For me, no, she wouldn't have. She only incurred those costs because she was acting as our mayor at the time. Thank you.
So anyone to speak against the motion? Did you want to clarify? Yes. I'm going to ask Mrs. Walters if she could answer Councillor Browning and all councillors as to reason why this is being dealt with within open council.
So I did have a request from Councillor Browning yesterday to look into seeing if we could move this into closed session. My advice was you would need a very good reason under the meeting regulations to be able to do that, that the information was already published in the public agenda. So it was really only the debate and the decision that would therefore be closed. So unless a councillor could put a very valid reason I didn't think it would be in council's interest, and we would certainly be criticised for moving that into closed session. And so just for the record, the ex-mayor did request this of the previous general manager quite some time ago, of which he sought the legal advice. It then was sat on for some reason, and he obviously left the organisation. The ex-mayor did request it of me to go to council before leaving council. It wasn't a request after her resignation, so it was coming to this agenda regardless. So I just want to clarify that for the record.
Thank you, Ms Walters. And for the record, for myself, I haven't had anything to say about this. However, I will not be supporting this motion simply because it's not, in my mind, it'll set a precedent, and we don't have at this stage a policy to cover that precedent. So that is the only reason why I will not be supporting it. Now, if there's no more debate on this, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour of the motion? That is Councillor Browning, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Breeny, Councillor Robinson. Those against are Councillor Simons, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Woods. The motion is carried 4-3. Councillors, I'm going to ask at this stage, do you need to have a break at all? No? We'll carry on. Thank you. So we'll move now on to 7.5, the Buckland Walk. Before we go into this one, councillors, no, it's okay. So away we go. We've got a motion on page 70.
Do we need our works manager, Mr. Browning,
yes, we need to go and get our works manager. We will we'll adjourn the meeting now at 3:59, and we'll reconvene at 4:10.
Not sign out, just
not sign out.
Just go on mute. Okay, thank you.
Go on mute and make councillors at 4:10. Have you started recording? Yes. Okay, so now we're up to 7.5, Buckland Walk. The recommendation is on page 70. Can I please have a motion? Councillor Breeny. You're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council undertake community consultation with the residents and ratepayers of Buckland in relation to the Buckland Walk.
A seconder for the motion, Councillor Arnold. Does the mover wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Does the seconder wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Acting Mayor.
So who seconded the motion? Councillor Arnold?
Oh, sorry.
You're forgiven, Councillor Robinson. No, thank you, Acting Mayor. I don't require.
So does anyone wish to speak to the motion? For the motion? Okay, so at this, sorry, Councillor Churchill?
It's not really for or against. I just had a question out of the budget implications in here, and it says, it refers to stage 1 of the Buckland Walk. I'm wondering how many stages of this there are, and if there are further implications budget-wise, if further stages, as in 2, 3 or 4 or whatever, are completed or need to be completed. Wondering if through you, Mayor Woods, whether perhaps our acting general manager, Walters, might be able to comment.
Through you, Mayor, I might pass to our works engineer, Mr. Brunning, to comment on how many additional stages are proposed in the walk and provide an additional comment.
You may need to speak up or come and sit here, Rob. Mr. Watt. I'm sorry.
Can everyone hear me okay? I have seen a concept plan which I believe has 2 other sections to it, but I don't believe we've done any detail or looked at any of the detail or cost implications of those, or committed to any of the other stages as I understand it. That's as much as I know it.
I agree with that comment.
Thanks for that, Mr. Brunning.
So is there anyone to speak for the motion or against? I'd like to say something, if I may, with the indulgence of council. I'd like to issue an apology to the community of Buckland for the angst that this walk has caused to the residents and ratepayers on behalf of council. That being said, I'd like to put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Easy. So we're 7.6, we're up to page 71, renewal lease for 6 Rectory Street, Swansea. The recommendation is on page 73. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I'll move that Council renews the lease for the property located at 6 Rectory Street, Swansea, to the University of Tasmania for a period of 12 months at a weekly rental of $150 to cover costs and future maintenance, effective from the 1st of July 2020.
A seconder for the motion. And just for councillors' information, Mr. Brunning has left the room. Okay, so would the mover like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Would the seconder like to speak? Councillor Breeny? No? Anyone for the motion? Against? That being said, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now move to 7.7, Saltworks Jetty replacement. There is a report there and the motion is on page 75. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons.
I'd like to move the motion that the council authorises the acting general manager to execute the deed of agreement and accept the funds to replace the old Saltworks jetty.
A second motion. Councillor Robinson. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor Woods. Yeah, look, I would just like to say this is a good example of, I know last month we talked about this, of the replacement of an asset that the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council doesn't have to pay for. Not sure how that gets depreciated at the end of the day, but I'm sure our acting general manager would be much more familiar than what I would be. But I think this is just a good outcome for the people that use this jetty. It'll be safer and it'll be a good piece of recreational facility for our municipality.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, just briefly, Acting Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I think by replacing this at no cost to council, it's going to delay any future maintenance cost, given that we're responsible for it. So I think certainly in the short to medium term, it's going to be a saving for council. Yeah, so I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. So anyone to speak against the motion? Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, I guess I've just got a few concerns about this one. I guess firstly, the budget implications. We really don't know what the budget implications are because we don't know the costing that's be required for the design, the engineering, or the construction. So I guess my concerns are that this may be $100,000. I would like, I would at least like to have some figures that come along with this. I don't believe that we have a report here that is detailed enough to tell us exactly what money is going to be required and what needs to be done. Also, I have concerns around the fact that right beside this jetty, there is a brand new boat launching ramp with a floating pontoon, which I believe is in fact used as the jetty. So in other words, this is the tie-up point for boats when they're coming back or going out. In fact, apart from seeing the jetty that we're potentially replacing or repairing or whatever as a platform for recreational fishing, I just can't quite get it. I just can't pull the thing together in a form that I can agree with at this time. It just isn't complete enough in terms of reports required and the budgeting that goes with it for me to support that. I'll need some convincing. Thank you.
So I'll just pass to Mrs. Walters to respond.
Through you, Mayor. Acting Mayor, there were quotes obtained at the time of putting in the grant about 12 months ago now. Came in at $85,000. So there was obviously expectation there may be other additional costs in the process, which why the grant was applied for $100,000, and MAS were quite accepting that there'd be no out-of-pocket expenses for council as part of the process.
That was it. Thank you. Anyone to speak for the motion? Against? Councillor Browning?
I will not be supporting this item because there's no costings provided in the report by a suitably qualified person. And I spoke with several people at the Saltworks who felt there was no need for the replacement of the jetty, particularly as there is a floating pontoon in place. And these locals felt the far greater need was for toilets on site to prevent people from defecating in this location. I've sent photos to the Acting General Manager of proof of people's defecating on site amongst the vegetation. This ongoing issue has been reported to council many times. Marine infrastructure should be in place without, shouldn't be in place without appropriate toilet facilities. This area in particular poses significant risk to the local oyster farmers through runoff from fecal matter. At the council meeting last month, it was endorsed by council that council for the next financial year, at least in general, only fund asset renewal projects, asset upgrades and new asset that address safety needs, and that position be reviewed in a 12 months time. Whilst it may be considered an opportunity to replace a jetty described as old, consideration should be given to what use the facility has and if these funds would be better used to rectify the issues of people defecating in the vegetation and its associated risk to health, safety and to the shellfish businesses in the area. And I wish to put a foreshadowed motion, please, if I can, Deputy Mayor. No, Acting Mayor, sorry.
It's okay. Could you please read it slowly for Ms Higgins?
Yep.
Thank you.
I move that Council 1 request Marine and Safety Tasmania consider the option of funding
Yes.
a toilet at the Saltworks boat ramp
Yes.
and maintenance of this structure. And 2, conduct a survey of users of this jetty
Yes.
and determine whether replacement of the jetty is required
Yes.
and is a good use of public funds.
Yes. Thank you. So now I will ask if anyone would like to speak for the motion that sits on the table at this present time. Against? I ask Mrs. Walters if she'd like to make a comment.
Through you, Mayor. I just wanted to also clarify, so my understanding is at the time of the original works to do the boat ramp that's there and the floating pontoon, the original concept was to get rid of the jetty that's there that we're talking about today. And there was significant representations from the public to retain that to Master and to Council at the time. Let's go back a number of years. Whether that's the current view of the public, I can't comment, but at the time there was representations to that effect, which is why it stayed, and we spent money maintaining it to at least a usable standard because it was getting quite derelict and now at a point of needing further works.
Thank you. Would Councillor Breeny?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to, I will not be supporting the motion that is put because there is definitely an increased use of this jetty, and the infrastructure that's there is not satisfactory in relation to its lack of toilets, etc. What's happened is the Swansea boat ramp has failed dramatically, and a very high percentage of people who use the Swansea boat ramp now use Saltworks as an alternative location. And what that means is that many, many more boat users are going to be using that boat ramp. They don't use the jetty, they actually use the boat ramp and pontoon. And I would agree that we need to conduct a survey of the users to determine whether or not the replacement of the jetty is a good use of funds. And I compliment Councillor Browning on her foreshadowed motion. I believe that there has been some maintenance done on this jetty relatively recently. Pine logs put, maybe replacement logs, I don't know, but from what it looks like, there's a relatively newly replaced deck, and I understand that the current status of it is not necessarily falling down. So I would, I'd not be supporting completely replacing this. For one other good, we don't have or haven't been given any information as to the design of the proposed jetty, whether it's going to be a duplicate of what's there, how it's been constructed, and what the actual costs are. I mean, estimates from, 18 months ago or whatever it was, of 85,000 plus other costs. I would accept that, I would expect that those costs wouldn't be up to date, and whether or not Mast say that they're going to come up with out-of-pocket expenses, I'd like to see that when it happens. But in the meantime, without a set of design plans that we can look at to see whether or not it's the right sort of thing for our municipality, and for council to approve. You know, we don't want another loo with a view situation at Saltworks. And without an accurate depreciation cost, I cannot support this first motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to or against the motion? So I'll put the motion that
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'd like to close.
Yeah, sorry, if you'd like to close, Councillor Simon.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to say I suspect must initially need approval to bring the funds across before they do a lot of expense and go to any big expenses on designs to see whether or not the council will actually allow this to happen. So this to me seems like it's an early stage in the piece. I wouldn't expect Mars to come up with detailed plans for us, then only to have them rejected because we didn't think it was a good idea. That makes no sense to me. So that's what I've got to add. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion now as the council authorises the acting general manager to execute the deed of agreement and accepts the funds to replace the old Saltworks jetty. So those for the motion? That's Councillor Woods, Councillor Simons, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Robinson. Those against? Councillor Browning, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Breening. The motion is passed 4-3. Thank you, councillors. We move now to 7.8, Freycinet Volunteer Marine Rescue Association. There is a report there and the recommendation is on page 77. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Breening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Acting Mayor. I move that Council approves a grant of $1,000 to the Freycinet Volunteer Marine Rescue Association towards the cost of its Extra Care for Longer Life project.
Thank you. Can I have the motion? Councillor Simons. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. It speaks for itself. Thank you.
Would you like to speak?
Likewise. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Anyone for the motion? Against? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. So now move to 7.9 on page 78. There is a recommendation on page 79. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Arnold.
I'll move that council approves the reallocation of $35,000 within the budget initially set aside for the purchase of trailers to purchase a dedicated vehicle of approximately the same value for the purposes of dog control.
Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Breening. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Acting Mayor. The report is self-explanatory.
The seconder like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, it's self-explanatory and it sounds like a very good idea. Thank you.
Any speakers for the motion? Councillor Churchill.
Sorry, I'm very slow at getting off mute. I'm not speaking against the motion or for the motion. It's really it's a question. Originally, the concept was that there were going to be dog trailers. I think were there to be 2 or 3 of these. Do you know, Madam Mayor? Or
yes, Councillor Churchill. Sorry, Mrs. Walters is indicating that there were 3. Yeah.
Thank you. So the idea of that was that we had one in, I think, Bishno, one in Swansea and one in Orford Tribunna, which all makes sense. But when you have a look at the statistics that go along with this, there's only about 14 dogs or 12 dogs or something impounded a year. And I think that even includes the ones who are actually turned in by the owners. And so I would see these trailers as getting very little use. But I know that originally that's what the community wanted. They wanted these trailers so that they had them in these locations. For example, when we had dog versus penguin issues in Bicheno. So I just think we need to be at least a little aware of what the original concept was. But I can well and truly understand how a van that is suitable to carry a dog has far more uses than a trailer. But I just think it's worth being aware of this, just to let the community know that we are at least aware of it, if I've got that right. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Is anyone speaking against the motion? Or Councillor Browning?
Through the acting mayor, I'm not speaking for or against. I just want some more clarification really about with this. I thought that people were being trained up in each town to be able to catch, hopefully, not that you can catch them much, I don't think, but catch these dogs. So how is this vehicle? Is there going to be somebody permanently available to get in this vehicle and drive to Coles Bay to try and collect a dog? I'd like to ask the acting GM if that's...
Mrs. Walters.
Through you, acting mayor. So the intent isn't to change our current operations. We have trained staff across the municipality and they use their existing work vehicles to collect dogs in those towns. They aren't necessarily in closed vehicles, so it's not a perfect situation. They are still able to restrain the dog on the back of their vehicle. Majority do get collected from down here in the vehicle, but also being lower to the ground, it makes it a lot easier not having to lift a 20, 30 kilo dog up into a fairly high vehicle or having the backing issues that the trailers posed. So it had certainly come from the staff that it be rethought from a practicality point of view.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Browning?
It still doesn't, through you, acting mayor, it still doesn't really answer the fact that if there's a dog in Bicheno, where's the vehicle going to be housed? And I guess you're saying that they can be restrained so they'll be lifted onto the back of a ute in Bicheno, and then will that vehicle then drive up and collect the dog?
So, through you, Mayor. My understanding is it normally go to the local pound if necessary, and then sometimes if they need to be then transported down to Triabana or go to the Sorrel Vet, we would collect them in the van. They don't normally do an overnight stay in the other dog pounds. They usually would come to Triabana to do an overnight stay if that was required, and they'd be collected in the van. Most scenarios. I'm not sure if Mr. Bellingham wants to add anything to the debate. He's had a number of conversations with staff about this matter.
Through you, Madam Mayor. I think you've answered all the questions. I think it's a simple principle. The van will stay in Triabana. If there's an issue with a dog in Bicheno, where we will drive out there and go collect it in the van. And as was rightly pointed out, the van is much lower than a four-wheel drive or some of the other vehicles that are available. And that'll make it much easier for people to get a dog into the back of the van. I don't know if that answers all your questions there, through you, Madam Mayor.
I'm still confused because the dog would have to be caught by the staff in Bicheno potentially anyway and lifted up onto the back of a ute anyway. first and then taken to the depot and put in, you know, put into whatever containment is set up. So then the van would just come up and collect it from that containment. So they're still going to be lifting a dog into the back of a ute potentially. That's what, you know, that's what I'm saying. So it's just my personal thoughts on the matter through the acting mayor.
Councillor Simons.
Can I just ask a question? Will the van be multi-purpose? The van won't just be used for putting a dog in, it'll be used in general everyday use for council workers?
It could be used for other purposes. One of the issues we often have is that the vehicle is readily available and accessible by our trained dog catchers.
So just going back, sorry through you, Mayor, just going back to Councillor Churchill's observations that do we only have a dozen dogs that are picked up a year?
Not sure if Mr. Bellingham can comment on the statistics. Through Mayor, I'm not sure if our Executive Manager of Development can comment on the statistics.
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, I'm not aware of the statistics at the moment, but I believe it is about 14 dogs a year from our enforcement officer.
Thank you. So is there anyone else to speak for the motion? Against the motion? So I'll put the motion that's on the table, and that is council approves the reallocation of $35,000 within the budget initially set aside for the purchase of trailers to purchase a dedicated vehicle of approximately the same value for the purpose of dog control. Those in favour of the motion? So that is Councillor Woods, Councillor Browning, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Breeny, Councillor Robinson. Those against? Councillor Simons. The motion is carried. 6-1. Thank you, councillors. So now we come to page 87.10, Glamorgan Spring Bay Park names not entered into place names Tasmania. The motion is on page 83. Can I please have a motion? Councillor Arnold.
I'll move that council recognises the existing names: A, Gordon Street Reserve; B, Rita and Doris Reserve; and 2, authorise the acting general manager to lodge the names with place names Tasmania in the process exchanging the word reserve with park.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Breeny. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Acting Mayor. I think the report again was very good.
Councillor Breeny, being the seconder, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. These two reserves are well known in the communities where they're located. The Gordon Street Reserve has for a long time been a section of Gordon, has been used as a walking track, nature reserve, if you like, planted and managed over the years. Everybody knows of its location who live in that section of it, and it hasn't caused any issues as far as I can see in relation to traffic, which is quite amazing because it does cut Gordon Street right in half. Gordon Street has access from Tasman Highway in the south side and from, I think it's Maria Street from the north side. But it is a very popular and well-known location. The Rita and Doris Reserve in Coles Bay is probably even better known. The couple, Rita and Doris, were adamant in protecting that section of bushland over decades, and the Rita, I think it was, passed away. Doris, I'm not sure which one, but they were in their 90s, 80s and 90s. they were honoured for their care and attention by the residents in having the section of land, the reserve, if you like, named in their honour. And although they don't live there at the moment, the survivor doesn't live there. The reserve itself is very important. It contains 3 threatened species and numerous species of orchids, has a walking track, etc. And a plaque with photographs and explanation has been placed on there as part of the ongoing care and attention that's given to that reserve. So I believe that these are valid nominees for nomination on nomenclature, Place Names Tasmania. Unfortunately, of course, the Rita and Doris Reserve was named on the plaque, the Rita and Doris Reserve, and I do understand that it is necessary to look at the alternative of having them as park, because otherwise it would be covered under different legislation to the reserve. But I might suggest that in the future I might come to council with recommendations as to some sort of signage adjustment for both of these reserves, but I will be supporting that motion. Thank you.
Councillor Brenny, would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Browning.
I'd just like some clarification through the acting mayor about, so the words in the process exchanging the word reserve for park. So are we changing the names from reserve to park? And so can, through the acting mayor, can the acting GM explain what the difference is? Because I don't see the Rita and Doris Reserve as a park. I see it as a reserve.
Gentlemen,
Sorry.
Through you, Acting Mayor. I mean, I can only go on the section of the legislation that has been provided by in relation to the Tasmanian Place Naming Guidelines, 8.2, which is covered in the background overview. The use of the word reserve as a generic should ideally be restricted to the areas of land reserved under Nature Conservation Act 2002. Consideration should be made to using the generic park for other types of recreation areas. So I guess they have written to us requesting this for you to consider.
Through the acting mayor, yeah. Well, I don't have a problem with it at all, but I mean, I went over there yesterday and went for a big walk around the Doris and Rita Reserve, and it's pretty fantastic. And except for the sewage that's coming in from one side of it into the reserve, it's pretty good. And it's got lots of things in it. And if I guess park reserve, I guess I don't have a problem with it. It's yeah, and I know the Gordon Street Reserve, so thank you.
Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, I guess I got a little bit of a problem with it. Not in terms of the Gordon Street Park. I don't have a problem with that. The Rita and Doris Reserve has been the Rita and Doris Reserve, as I understand it, since about the 1960s. A reserve to me is, I think, is what's alluded to here a little bit, even though it mightn't be officially under the Nature Conservation Act. But it's certainly from, I haven't seen it, but I've had it described to me well and truly, and I understand there are significant species of vegetation in there, including orchids and the like, that are really a bit more and deserve a lot of respect. And I guess I just feel a little bit uncomfortable about changing this to a park. I think of a park as more open space, something where there might be a lot more trees and a lot less under vegetation or low level vegetation. But apparently this one has quite a bit of dense vegetation of significant value. And I guess the wording here is the generic, as a generic should ideally be restricted to areas under the Act, but it doesn't say must. And I don't know, I think the local community over there might be a little bit concerned if we just change it to park from reserve when there's, I know it sounds not very significant, but it may be significant to them. And it may be that they feel council is taking some small thing away from them. They've called it that for all these decades. Why do we come along suddenly and then say, no, it's not a reserve, we're going to call it a park? I just have a little bit of a problem with it. I have certainly no problem with the name. Thank you.
Councillor Browning.
Through the acting mayor, yeah, yes, I agree. And I'm just looking at, I took lots of photos yesterday. And it says, welcome to the Rita and Doris Reserve. And it's got all the endangered species and a picture of them. And they're both dead now, actually. Rita died at the end of last year at the age of 100. And Doris died previously to that. And yeah, the locals, you know, it is covered in dense vegetation of she oaks and peppermint gums. And some of the peppermint gums, I reckon, look like, you know, they're 200 years old. So it's pretty fantastic. So I don't consider that it's a park. It's more a reserve, and it's 5 acres. It's massive. So yeah, so it's a bit. I think the locals would be upset if it got changed to a park, but there's always conflict, isn't there?
Councillor Browning. Councillor Arnold. I'll come to you next, Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, I have to agree with the other speakers. Ideally, I think, particularly, I think Gordon Street could be Gordon Street Park, but I really have to agree that Rita and Doris should remain reserved. I was only working on the recommendation on the basis that I didn't think the land was reserved under the Nature Conservation Act, and rather than lose the point of interest in total because we didn't change the name to park, it seemed a reasonable way to go about it. But if we can put an argument to, what are they called? Place Names Tasmania, to retain the name reserve, because as someone rightfully pointed out, it says should ideally be restricted to areas. As it was pointed out, it doesn't say it must be. So perhaps we can amend it to that we have no problem with the Gordon Street Reserve being called Gordon Street Park, but we would like to retain the name Rita and Doris Reserve because of the long history of it being a reserve, even if it's not under the Nature Conservation Act.
So, Councillor Arnold, as the mover of the motion, are you suggesting an amendment to that motion, or is somebody else going to put an amendment to that motion?
Listen to the debate. I actually would like to see. Us put to Place Names Tasmania that we retain the name Rita and Doris Reserve. So if that needs a small amendment to the motion, then yes, that I'm happy to do that if the seconder is.
Sorry, Cabrini.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I agree. I've been persuaded by argument, discussion, and I think the original motion can be amended slightly, and Possibly if Councillor Arnold were to suggest an amendment, I'd be certainly looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold.
If I may, Acting Mayor, I do have that. So what I would say, in the process exchanging the word reserve with park for Gordon Street, and retain Rita and Doris Reserve because of the historical value of the name.
So are we recognising the that would have to change twice?
So with keeping the first part?
So recognises the existing name Gordon Street Reserve.
Yep.
Yes.
And then in the second part, where we've got the brackets, in the process exchanging words reserve with park for Gordon Street Park, for Gordon Street.
Yes.
We have park there or reserve? I'm not quite sure. For Gordon Street. And
I think we are agreed that there's no problem with changing Gordon Street Reserve to Gordon Street Park, and that we retain the name Rita and Doris Reserve. And if we have to have a reason, it's for the historical value of the area.
So will that, just let me run this, recognise the existing name. We're taking that all out.
no, leaving that in.
So A and B are already in there.
Yes.
And authorise the acting general manager to lodge the names with place names Tasmania, open brackets, and in the process exchanging the word reserve with park for Gordon Street, and the name Rita and Doris Reserve be retained due to the historical value of the area.
Yes.
So did all councillors get that amendment? Okay, so Councillor Brenny, you have no problem with that amendment being the seconder of the motion? Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak to or against the motion? That being said, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So now we come to 7.11, late report item, performance improvement direction. There is a recommendation there. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Browning.
I move that Council authorise the Acting General Manager to write to the Minister for Local Government and Director Local Government with a milestone plan to meet the performance improvement direction requirements by the 31st of March 2021.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Brenny. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Through the Mayor, all I'd like to say is that I hope it doesn't get pulled in any further, and let's move forward.
Thank you. Does a seconder wish to speak to the motion? No? Anyone speak for the motion? Anyone to speak against the motion? That being said, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. Sorry, private jokes over here. Not really.
Getting organised.
Dear. So we're coming to item 9.1, petition for council Save Glamorgan Spring Bay Council Visitor Information Centres. There is a report there and a recommendation on page 86. Can I have a motion, please? No motion. Is there no one to support this motion, the recommendation? Just one moment, councillors. So, Councillor, we've come to a very sticky point in this motion or in this recommendation. We do need a mover and a seconder for this to get off the floor. If we don't have a mover and a seconder, I'm actually not sure what will happen. And we have been presented with a petition from the Australian Services Union. So, Councillor Simons?
Mayor Woods, I'll move that Council A receives the petition for council save Glamorgan Spring Bay Council Visitor Information Centres as presented by Mr. Aaron Delator of the Australian Services Union and tabled by the Acting General Manager at the ordinary council meeting held 28th of July 2020, and B, determines what action is to be taken in respect of the petition.
I need a seconder, please. A seconder? Councillor Arnold? Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
It would just be my understanding, Madam Mayor, that we would have to acknowledge the fact that we've received the petition, as you were saying. So no other thoughts on it other than that.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold, being the seconder, would you like, do you have anything?
I concur with Councillor Simons. I think section 58, the tabling of the petition, it says the General Manager who has been presented with petition to receive under subsection 1B is to table the petition at the next ordinary council meeting. And I think it probably goes without saying that council then need to receive it at least or note it.
So does anyone like to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Brini? Or speak?
Sorry, Mayor, I was intending to make a comment neither for or against the motion.
You can make the comment.
Thank you. 5, the second paragraph up, section 60 of the Local Government 1893 requires that within 42 days after the tabling of the petition, the council at that meeting is to determine any action the action to be taken in respect of the petition. It seems that we are bound to take some action. I would assume that in order to satisfy section S60, we would need to progress this. So although I'm inclined to be underwhelmed by the fact that people don't seem to understand council's situation and don't seem to understand the implications of it and the implications of this Visitor Information Centre in relation to our previous decision. And until we make a different decision, the support of that previous decision by all councillors is mandatory. In order to progress this, I will support the motion. However, only under the terms that we're bound to do so, unless I'm given other instructions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brini. Anyone else to speak for the motion? Against? Councillor Churchill?
Yeah, my inclination is to truly treat this with the respect that it deserves. I'll put a foreshadowing motion that it be received and noted.
Have they done something as their action? Well, you could just, councillors receive petition. Plans for action.
Council receives and notes the petition. Words like that would do.
We're just wondering if that is we're foreshadowing the motion, or we're amending, or it's an amendment to Part B as that's determining your action.
Yeah, well, the action is that we're noting it. Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're reading.
So, Councillor Churchill, would you like a foreshadowed motion, or would you like to amend the motion for that? What you've just said is to be, instead of determines what action is to be taken in respect to the petition, or would you like it to, the foreshadowed motion that you've got is that B is to, the council receives and notes.
Look, I'm having a bit of trouble actually hearing the General Manager when she speaks, but could I ask her suggestion again, what she was saying?
My suggestion was just considering whether that might be an amendment to Part B, that's part of determining your action. I'm not sure. That is you're receiving and noting it as your action. I'm not sure if
yeah, look, yeah, why don't we do that? It's Part B. If that's acceptable, can't be done. All right. Well, I'll drop my foreshadowing motion and leave it alone.
Councillor Simons.
Yeah, thank you. Just considering I moved the motion, I'm open to consideration on the fact that we do say that council receives the petition. I'm not sure what Part B is. I sort of question, we've had 1,056 signatures on it. It's quite a substantial position, and it probably deserves more than just being cursory looked at. I just wonder whether we're not doing people a disservice by not looking at it. I'm not saying we should change our decision or go anything of that nature, but I feel like it's a little flippant if we don't consider it in some detail at least, just to say we received it and that's about it, is all we're going to do with it. I'm pretty sure that won't make the 1,056 people that signed it particularly happy. So I'm open to suggestions, really. I'm quite happy to amend the motion if someone can make a good suggestion.
Councillor Arnold?
In relation to this matter, I actually had a motion for Part B if the motion had been moved in just one part. So Part A was just that we received the motion, and then to determine what the action is to be taken in respect to the petition, I actually had a motion that would determine what our action would be. So I will foreshadow that now, and that is that in acknowledging the petition received and the very strong community and tourism industry sector sentiment, Council review the decision made in closed session on the 26th of May 2020 to divest from the Visitor Information Centre network at the August ordinary meeting of Council.
Slow that down a little bit. Oh, you've got it?
Now, I might ask, Madam Acting Mayor, not totally sure that it's a foreshadowed motion or just a motion, because at the end of the day, it's not foreshadowing a change, it's foreshadowing the determination of Part B. So I'm not totally sure of that.
Yeah.
Don't we have a section where councillors can move motion?
That motion could have come straight from Councillor Arnold in the first instance. If Councillor Simons and Councillor Arnold moved A and B, I just need to check the regs to make sure that, because Councillor Arnold seconded the original motion, I'm pretty sure it's okay to foreshadow a motion because it's not an amendment to the original motion.
So if you can just give us a little bit of time, councillors, for some clarification on.
That's fine. I'll be perfectly honest, with the debate that's gone on, I actually forgotten that I had seconded it. Sorry. I was just more inclined to think I wanted to get an outcome.
Councillor.
Through the acting mayor, can I just ask, did I miss something and we didn't get a copy of the petitions? The petition?
It was emailed to us all, Councillor Browning.
Was it?
Probably by our incorrectly.
Yes, it was. I think, and if I remember correctly, it was emailed to us all by Mr. Delator. And I'm not sure of the date that it was, 8th of July.
That's fine. She's not amending, she's offering you.
With all the signatures?
That's correct.
When was it? Sorry?
8th of July. Around the 8th of July.
Thank you.
So.
Would you like to read that, Josie?
Well, there's two at the moment. So we have the original motion, A and B. We have Councillor Churchill's foreshadowed motion that council receives and notes the petition for council save Glamorgan Spring Bay Council visitor information centres, and the other foreshadowed motion from Councillor Arnold, that in acknowledging the petition received and the very strong community and tourism industry sector sentiment, council reviewed the decision made in closed session on the 26th of May 2020 to divest from the Visitor Information Centre network at the August ordinary meeting of council.
Okay, councillors. So what I'm going to do is, if I'm going to put the original motion, which Councillor Simons moved and Councillor Arnold seconded, and that is what is written in your agendas. So I'll put that motion. Sorry, Councillor Simons.
Sorry, Acting Mayor Woods, just to close, I'm happy to remove Part B if Councillor Arnold is in agreement of this, of my original motion, if that helps with the foreshadowing.
I'm not totally sure. Acting Mayor needs some advice around that.
To them, if Councillor Simons would like to modify his decision with the approval of the seconder, that's appropriate.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that because at least we've received the petition. That takes care of that part of it, and then we can discuss the foreshadowed part of it.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is put the motion to councillors of Part A only. That is, receives a petition for council, save Glamorgan Spring Bay Council Visitor Information Centres as presented by Mr. Aaron Delator of the Australian Services Union and tabled by the Acting General Manager at the ordinary council meeting held 28th of July 2020. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That's it. So we need now a second separate motion, please. Councillor Arnold.
All right, thank you. I will move that in acknowledging the petition received and the very strong community and tourism industry sector sentiment, Council review the decision made in closed session on the 26th of May 2020 to divest from the Visitor Information Centre network at the August ordinary meeting of Council.
I have a seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Simons. Would the mover like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please, Acting Mayor. The decision that was made at the 26th of May meeting was, I believe, very poorly handled, and it created an enormous amount of angst, confusion and bitterness in the community. I do appreciate the fact that there was staff involved and the matter had to be dealt with in confidential session. However, I firmly believe that with some careful consideration of the staff and their future, the primary motion to divest from the Visitor Information Centre network could have been debated in open council at that time. By reviewing the decision in August in open council, it is an opportunity for council to have open and transparent governance discussions, something that many in this chamber campaigned on, and which in my view has been sadly lacking in some of the decision making. So I would just like to see it, I'd like to see this matter reviewed in open council for the community's sake. Thank you.
So would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think considering the amount of community angst on this, I think it's probably worthy of reviewing our decision. I think whether it's we amend our position on it or we look to be a part player in the Visitor Information Centre, I think we just need to have a look at it again, because there certainly has been a really strong community backlash and an industry backlash to this decision. And I think it'd be remiss of us if we didn't take the opportunity to review it.
Thank you. So is there anyone to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Churchill?
Yeah, look, I totally get what both Councillor Simons and Councillor Arnold are saying here. I totally get that. The original motion was to transition out of the VICs by the end of October. And I think that is the path that we should be pursuing. And in consultation with the community, for sure, absolutely. We've got to help through to get the best outcomes for this. But I'm just not comfortable with saying or even intimating that we might be prepared to reverse this decision. I guess that's where I feel really uncomfortable, because I don't believe that it is financially viable for us to reverse that decision, but I do believe that we should be helping where we can to come through and get answers. That allocation of money that we talked about earlier, that we gave to the East Coast Tourism, for example, you know, that's part of our support, and it may be, as I think Councillor Breeny pointed out, that we may need to add more money into that before the end of the year, and part of that may be used in this transition process. I don't know what the outcomes are going to be. I can't see that far ahead. But I think for us to intimate to the community that we might reverse our decision at this point is irresponsible. Thank you.
Anyone speak for the motion? Councillor Simons?
And I totally understand Councillor Churchill's position there. I'm not sure if it'd be looked upon as reversing our decision. I think what we're asking to do is to review the decision to see perhaps whether or not whether or not council somehow needs to be involved somewhere, whether we need to extend the transition date, maybe whether what a smaller part we play in all this. I just don't think we got the chance in closed session to explore all the options, and I feel that for myself, it felt like a very rushed decision, and I look back on it and I felt like it was a poor decision that I made, and I would like the chance to review it. And I feel like with all the community sentiment, they probably expect us to perhaps have another look at it. I'm not saying we reverse it. I'm just saying we look at perhaps what's, it could be worded, you know, I'm not sure how we word it, but I'm sure our general manager can help us out with that side of it.
Greenie?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I think we may be underestimating the support for our action in the community. I understand that that this petition is quite substantial, but I have to tell you that the support that our action has received in the community is certainly not to be underestimated. And the fact that it's a matter of financial expedience, given our current situation, was, I would have understood to be, the primary consideration. The fact that there may be, and this could be an issue that needs to be addressed, there may be the need for us to get out there in the community somehow or other as a council and make it clear to the community. A lot of the people who signed this petition, for example, make it clear to them the actual reasons for doing it. We're not just shutting doors. We're trying to divest ourselves from council's expenditure on these things. And I understand that the progress that's been made so far in negotiating with alternative business arrangements for visitor information centres has been substantial. And to think that we just have to change our point of view or even review our point of view at the moment is, I think it's very premature. And I have no hesitation whatsoever in defending my stance at that meeting where we decided to look at the divesting of it, and we've actually done it, and defending that to the point where I'm certainly not going to be supporting this motion. But I do ask councillors to reconsider the fact that the perception that you're giving, that we're uncertain, unsure, and unaware of what we've done in the past, I think that's false. And I think we need to stand a lot firmer than that as a group.
Thank you, Councillor Greenie. Anyone to speak for the motion? Against? Councillor Churchill?
Yes, I do accept that I have. Thank you, Mayor Woods, already spoken, but if you just bear my indulgence, it's just that the word reversal is used in the report. And I think that that is misleading. And I think that that's probably what we need to be bearing in mind here, that there's an implication that we might be reversing the decision. Revising the decision is quite a different word. And so I think we just need to be careful around the wording of that so that we don't send an expectation to the community that is false. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone to speak for? Against? Councillor Arnold, as the mover, would you like to close debate?
Yes, please. I take on board everything that everybody has said. I don't think the motion is actually providing any false hope to the community. Unlike other councillors, most of the comment that I've had has been that the community is not supporting council in this. So there's very clearly two schools of thought out there. And the motion that I've suggested, it's not designed to reverse our decision. I'm asking for it. I've used the word review, but I'm happy to have that changed to revise, although I think revise would probably send the wrong message. I'm just asking for review. the suggestion's not to reverse the decision. It's to pay due respect to the very strong community sentiment that came through from this petition. And I think it's, as Councillor Simon said, will give councillors the opportunity to make further comment around our decision, the reasons why the decision was made, to put that out there in an open session. And that's all I'm asking.
Councillor Arnold. That being said, I will now put that motion. The motion is, please, you have words there.
Moved Councillor Cheryl Arnold, seconded Councillor Michael Simons, that in acknowledging the petition received and the very strong community and tourism industry sector sentiment, Council reviewed the decision made in closed session on the 26th of May 2020 to divest from the Visitor Information Centre network at the August ordinary meeting of Council.
So I'll put that motion. All those in favour? So that's Councillor Woods, Councillor Simons, Councillor Arnold. Those against? Councillor Browning, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Breening and Councillor Robinson. The motion is lost. So that's it? Yeah, okay, so we move now, councillors, to questions without notice, and we have questions without notice from the ordinary council meeting from Councillor Arnold, and there are responses from the acting general manager there. And then we questions without notice. Is there any other questions without notice? Councillor Browning.
Through you, Acting Mayor, I have a question without notice. Glamorgan Spring Bay Council took over a large section of the Wailankta Road several years ago from the state government. This deal required state government to give the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council approximately $850,000 to bring this section of road up to a suitable and safe standard. Please confirm if the full length of the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council owned road, 1, has been completed to the required standard. 2, that the funds provided by the state government were sufficient to cover the cost. 3, that all safety railings have been installed and at whose cost. And 4, that all the gravel purchased by council for this project was an appropriate standard and used on this project. And if not, what happened with that gravel, or what actions was taken? What action was taken? And I have a copy of it, so I can text it. I'll send it as a message to Josie, to anyone?
Miss Councillor Browning, are you able to send it by email to Miss Higgins? Because I dare say that that will have to be taken on notice.
Okay, I can scan it and send it. Is that, do you?
Yep, that's it.
You don't need to do it right now. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So you can take that on notice. So Mrs. Walters is going to take that on notice. Thank you, Councillor Browning. Any other questions without notice? No. That being said, I need a motion from council to move into close to deal with the confidential minutes of the meeting. So Councillor Arnold.
I'll move that council move into closed session at 5:26.
Can I have a second, please? Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bruni. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We will now move into closed session.
Do we need to sign out and sign into another session?
We'll just stop the recording.
It's still